In this session, I'm going to take a look in a bit more detail at the routing options that we have available on the desk. Some of these we've touched on in different ways over previous sessions, but there is a dedicated routing section in the setup that we can look at for a bit more detail. To access it, there's the routing button. So if we select that first, and need then to select the channel that we want to look at. We'll pick one of our vocal mics. As with processing, you have a summary which shows you the channel you selected highlighted and other channels that are nearby as well, and you can slide around to see those if you need to. From top to bottom then we have direct out, which is a way of sending a channel out to external for a laptop, for instance. You've then got the DCA and the mute group assignments, and then a section to do with the main and mix sends. We'll go through each of those in turn. Direct out we've not used before. In the previous session I did on multi-track recording, I used Tieline to do a recording on a laptop. Direct out is another option for doing that. It allows you to send the output from the channel directly to an external system, so a laptop for instance. For each channel you can select the level that it goes out at. In the I/O settings you would map that then to where you wanted to route it to, and then there are some global settings that control whether at what point it works. The difference between this and a tie line is that you can control at what point in the processing chain the direct out is applied. For instance, you can choose go to post preamp, which is what the tie line is doing, or you can then pick any point down the processing chain. There are also some global settings here that allow us to say, do we take account of mutes, for instance, and faders. So you've got a general control over that. In the DCA and mute groups, we've talked about DCAs in previous session, but I've not touched on mute groups. DCA assignment we looked at, so for the channel I've selected, I can decide whether to assign it to a DCA or not on this section. The same is true of mute groups. Mute groups are very simple. There is no direct selection for them on the desk by default. They are a mute on and off only. The way you access them is through a soft key. So I could assign my vocal mic to mute group number 1, for instance. If I tap on the view, then I can see, as with DCA, I can see all of the channels assigned to this. So for instance, I could assign my whole band to mute group number 1. At the moment there's no way to access it. I could go onto the soft key setup and assign a spare soft key to that, and that will give me a way to mute and unmute that whole band, for instance, if that's how I wanted to do it. And take those off for the moment. So we've touched on those. The final section then is the mix routing. For this you've got your main left right, so that tells you the channels going to the main. We've also then got the auxes, so this is our foldback channels, the 4 remaining ones, and then the groups. For auxes you've got whether it's pre or post fade. For foldback we set those all to pre-fade so that the faders are working independently. You can then assign them or not, so you can tap the assign on and off. This works the same as the assign on the main part of the desk, for instance. So if I selected my mix 1 left and looked at the assignments, I could assign on and off on the desk itself. That's the same as that. You can then also see the level that that's assigned to. So that's exactly the same as the fader level if I was looking at that mix. So for instance, at the moment this is set to 0, so if I adjusted that, that would adjust the mix level for that channel into that aux. That's for all of those. For groups, there's no mix level because they are just assignment, but I can control the assignment of those. I can also do that for FX send as well on here. That applies to any channel that I can select. You can see those on here. I can assign those. It just gives me another view onto the routing options so that I can see and assign things in one place if I want to. That's it on routing. It's very straightforward. It's a different view, but I thought it was worthwhile just quickly going through that so you can see how things work.